It's a privilege to be here. It's made possible because of Annie and her program and South Pizza Hospital and college and the wonderful, vibrant community of Homer. So just feel so fortunate, so privileged. I feel like I've got the best job ever, getting to be a doctor focused on wellness. So I'm both a family practice MD and an Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner. So I always feel like I'm presenting things through two lenses, the conventional medical approach and the extra dimensions of root causes and wellness. And tonight we'll be talking about peace and why it's so important to our health. So just one audience engagement moment tonight, but potentially a fun exercise for all of you. So the world's most famous functional medicine doctor, Mark Hyman, has said that food is the single most important thing to our health. And just for a moment, we're going to challenge that assumption and ask ourselves whether or not the single most important thing for our health could be stress management. So going to take a show of hands and see over the course of the conversation. If you're in the camp that food's most important, please raise your hand. Okay, got about 5 or 6. And if you're in the camp that stress management is the most important, raise your hand for that one. Okay, excellent. Thanks so much. So about 2 to 1 for stress. So we'll talk more about that. So tonight we'll do something a little bit different. If you all could pass this around, and maybe I'll get some help. We'll split side of the room. Thank you very much. So for anybody that wants one, these are from the Institute for Functional Medicine, and this is the tool that's used by functional medicine medical providers to figure out people's root causes in terms of what's happening for them. And so this is two-sided. There's a busy side. Don't be intimidated by that side. That's more to noodle with when you get home sometime. Just all the different dimensions of our health on what's called the matrix. It's got explanations. And then there's a backside that's got a timeline. And so for tonight's purposes, then there's just a chance for you all to actually look under the hood of functional medicine and be aware of how the science of functional medicine helps determine where our health or our lack of health comes from. So this is the timeline. And what's really powerful about this is you can see antecedents are things that come before. Our health starts before we're born. And so if our parents are stressed, we come into the world with our stress genes turned on. There's multi-generational genetic and cumulative manifestations of who and how the people in our families were in the world before we come into the world. And then there's these mediators and perpetuators after birth. What keeps things rolling for better or worse? What are the triggers to changes in our health? And down below, what are our signs and symptoms? And so just know this timeline is a really powerful tool, and it's kind of shocking how little this gets used in terms of figuring out our medical problems. If somebody gets a cold every month after their divorce, the stress of their divorce undercut their immunity. They can see that in a timeline like this. And then this again, this is the busy version, just so to the degree that which you're interested, these different nodes of our health, these are, here's the simpler version, right? These are these different things that affect us. And so on the left, you've got what came before, what are triggers, what are mediators and perpetuators of our health. On the bottom, you've got lifestyle factors, obvious things like sleep and relaxation, movement, food, stress or stress management, relationships. And then up above, you can see our mental and emotional, spiritual well-being, assimilation, which is nutrient assimilation, gut function, this communication node, our nervous system, our hormones, biotransformation, that's detox, defense and repair, that's our immune system. These nodes are all interrelated. So we're more like ecosystems in nature than like machines. That's one fascinating reality of physiology. You can see down there in purple, I've marked peace. And when I heard about stress management over the years, I always thought what this really boils down to is whether or not we have inner peace. And the degree to which people don't have inner peace, they often manifest all kinds of things that frustrate them. And to the degree to which they do have inner peace, they're often healthier and happier. So stress physiology, stress science, you can see here on the left is performance, whether it's performance on a test or our abilities to be patient and kind with our spouse or the ability to rake the yard. Just as stresses go up on that bottom axis, the need to perform, the need brought on by the environment for us to have to generate tasks and get things done, it results in increased performance until it doesn't. And so that stress that we've got to take that test at school helps until we get stressed out and then our brains go into shutdown. And this happens in our bodies too. So if we're not at all stressed, we don't get stronger, we don't get more resilient, we don't become more clever. But if we get overwhelmed and overburdened, then systems start breaking down. So this is called allostatic load. And it's important to remember stress is a good thing to a point. So stress results in our health. It results in the power plants of our cells, the mitochondria, working well. We have to stress them for them to replicate. We become resilient and confident in response to our successful responses to stress. And then the part of our body that's doing this is called the autonomic nervous system. And I just always find it easier for people to relate to and remember if we just call it the automatic nervous system. And so there's the brain and the spinal cord and this main rest and restore nerve called the vagus. But the bottom line here is there's these two different branches of this nervous system. And this is the key regulatory part of the nervous system that has to do with whether or not we're in a state of peace or not. So the sympathetic is the fight, flight, freeze, faint nervous system, and the parasympathetic is rest and restore. And you can see on the bottom, there's all these cool blue and aqua colors, rest and restore. And in this list, the heart rate is nice and slow, and the person's digesting, and the reproductive organs are supported and all that kind of thing. And then over in the fight, flight, freeze, faint column, the heart rate is faster. We're not sending blood flow to the gut. We're not sending blood flow to the reproductive system. And so this is going to have implications for the degree to which we can be in peace or not, whether we're in the default mode, which is rest and restore, or whether our executive function is primarily driven day to day by being in fight, flight, freeze, faint mode, which many of us are, we just don't know it. So here again, this is the sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, many of us have heard of. Some of the most important dimensions of this part of the nervous system are actually the freeze faint part, the degree to which, just like creatures in nature, will actually sort of get locked up and respond to a potential threat. And then this issue of fainting, this is dissociating when a prey animal just checks out to try to trick the predator into thinking that the creature's playing dead. And an interesting question to ask ourselves is when we're, watching Netflix or self-medicating any way that we do, and we think maybe it's gone past the tipping point. Are we dissociating? So, sometimes when we get back to practices like yoga and meditation and just being present in the moment, we're remembering to not check out quite as much. So the dominant mode we want to be in is rest and restore, rest and digest mode. That's the parasympathetic. And manifestations of having robust parasympathetic tone that's balanced with the sympathetic nervous system include good sleep, good recovery from workouts, a sense of abundance manifesting in our lives, a good immune system, and good fertility. And then a really cool thing about good parasympathetic tone and the perception of peace, and then the perception of peace and having good parasympathetic tone is they feed one another. And so it's really nice anytime we can get traction anywhere and have a sense of peace, we can have that consolation that we're building parasympathetic tone. And then if we treat peace as a verb and we undertake peaceful activities, we build parasympathetic tone. So this is a self-perpetuating and self-improving process. One cool person I want to share with you is Dr. Heidi Hanna, who I've interviewed on the Field Notes podcast. So if you ever want to check that out, that's easy to find on the Seaworthy website. And for tonight's purposes, this is kind of a summary of her decades of research into stress, but she points out we're wired for safety. Why does this matter? If you look at the timeline, one very poignant thing to think about, and it's kind of stating the obvious, but I think it's super important. So if somebody doesn't have safe circumstances, it's very hard to be at peace. And for any of us who are actually fortunate enough to be physically safe, be emotionally safe, that's a precondition of peace. So one way to show up for ourselves and in the world is just to try to be grateful that the degree to which we are physically, emotionally safe, and to seek to show up for others that we love and care about in our community, that other people can be safe. Because if we're not physically and emotionally safe, it's either very difficult or almost impossible to have a set of preconditions that are favorable for peace. And then the part that's a little more radically important is that our perception of safety has the same consequences in the body as actual unsafety. And so this becomes very important as well. Our perceptions of safety, or the perceptions of safety of our mother or our parents or the generations coming before us, that all comes down into our signs and symptoms and our various health conditions over the courses of our lives. And so here you can see on this matrix just the nodes that are really salient to tonight. Down under stress management, if we feel safe, then that's feeding that communication node, the brain, the adrenals. That there's the safe signaling there, which is feeding into the mental and emotional and spiritual stability. And all of these nodes are feeding one another. And then here, this is the sort of good job for all of you that picked the second answer on the audience engagement. So you can see down there when the stress management node is in a peaceful place, then that's coming over and that's going up and it's turning on digestion. And so the reason it's sort of a trick question is they're both important things for our health, that healthy whole food. But you'll see a little later in tonight's presentation, I've done many, many tests on people to see how well their bodies absorb nutrients. And the main thing that seems to happen in people who are putting the right things in, who have these tests show that there still aren't enough nutrients, is that they're simply not even getting assimilated at the level of the gut. So also you can see here then under the communication node, parasympathetic, it's driving digestion, it's driving good immunity, it's helping the power plants of the cells create good energy, it's helping the body's detox pathways work properly at night. And then just to compare and contrast, when people are in sympathetic nervous system overdrive at the level of the brain and the nervous system, in terms of their perceptions of stress management, they're stressed out. This is the price we pay. Sleep gets undercut, ability to assimilate nutrients down under nutrition. Up top, assimilation, same thing, nutrients not coming in, immune system shut down, lack of perceived energy and energy at the level of the power plants of the cells, and detox gets undercut. So you can see the price we pay if we're stressed out. So how do we measure peace? One really cool thing to know is that we can measure what's called heart rate variability, and we'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. And so people can use an Oura ring. And by the way, I'm not affiliated with Oura Ring. I'm not affiliated with HeartMath. But Oura rings measure people's heart rate variability 24 hours a day, and you can track over time whether you're in a state of peace or not. We'll get more into the next slide. And then this is a HeartMath device. So it's got a little clip that goes to the person's ear and it syncs up with their phone. And then the person can do heart rate variability building sessions to both measure and build HRV over time. We can look at genetic expression. We'll see a slide shortly here about Herb Benson at Harvard and how he measured peace via genetic studies. We can measure free cortisol levels in the saliva, and we can look at how well or how poorly people absorb nutrients. So this is heart rate variability, and this came out of the HeartMath Institute. And you can see here, just this is what the heart rate of this person is doing over time. And our natural physiologic baseline is for our heart rate to wander. And so it's a little bit like a tennis player getting ready to accept serve. So our hearts aren't like a motor at idle. They don't just sit at a certain number of RPMs. It's actually natural for our heart rate to go up and down. And when there's these big oscillations that are smooth sine waves, we're in rest and digest mode. And then when there's these narrower amplitude, jaggedy wanderings, we're in stress distress mode. So here at the level of structural integrity, the heart is a pump and the nerves, these nerves go to the communication node, the brain, and you'll see a slide shortly here with Roland McCraty, one of my heroes from the HeartMath Institute. He's a hardcore bench scientist. He found nerves that go from the heart to the brain. And when they had people slow down their breathing and think about something they care about and appreciate coming and going in and out of the chest during a HeartMath session, they found that the nerves going from the heart to the brain reshift executive control from the midbrain, the stress distress brain, back to the prefrontal cortex. So their hearts are running their brains in response to this activity. So here's my hero, Dr. McCraty. And here's one of these devices. And then what people try to do is they try to build scores over time. And anytime I do get it, have the good fortune to do one of these presentations, I always want you to have takeaway items. And so people can get one of these inner balance devices and do 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, and build heart rate variability over time. The more, the better. And that results in perceived peace. And then again, it's a peace as a verb. It's a peace action. So you're taking action to be peaceful, which cultivates more peace. Another thing we can do to look at whether we're peaceful or not is we can just look at over the course of each day what our free cortisols are doing. And so this is a lab test that can be done by a functional medicine office. And so waking 30 minutes, 60 minutes, afternoon or night, just these blue dots show how much each day this person is in this. The manager wakes the body up via free cortisol and then puts the body to sleep at night via melatonin. So free cortisol, melatonin, free cortisol, melatonin. This person's got adrenal dysfunction or what would be called adrenal fatigue because those free cortisols are low, they're underwater relative to the optimal range. Cortisol awakening response is slumpy. And so this is a person who might need a seasonal light in the morning or some exercises or maybe a little bit of licorice or Panax ginseng or something like that. Another person might be stressed out. They'd be running really high free cortisols and need cortisol manager or phosphatidylserine or something like that. So this is really, really illuminating just to see what our free cortisol patterns are doing. And then here's a blood test we do in functional medicine and actually looks at the amounts of nutrients in the body. And so when this blood test comes back, it'll tell us, does the person have enough antioxidants? Do they have enough B vitamins and minerals? Do they have enough digestive enzymes and amino acids? And then the yellow and red zones reflect that this person's got more than expected need. And because I've been 18 years in functional medicine and I look a lot of these NutrEvals from Genova, I've had quite a number of occasions to see people literally living impeccably and putting the right whole food in there and getting rest and doing all the right things and well-chosen professional grade supplements. And then I've seen these shift from green zone to yellow and red in response to stress. And so just in terms of the degree to which we can say, oh, this is a big deal. I not only need to try to take impeccable care of myself, but as much as I'm able to be in a state of peace, that means those things I'm putting in there can actually get where they need to go and do their work. And then there's these philosophical dimensions to all of this, of course. And so this is an interesting person. This is Thich Nhat Hanh. And in 1967, he was nominated by Martin Luther King Jr. for the Nobel Peace Prize. And I think this quote is super important because he says, there is no peace. Peace is the path, which is one of these Zen riddles, of course. But it's such a great reminder that we often say, when am I going to be at peace? What is it going to be when I have enough money or the right job or the right significant other or the right dog or enough time off? And many of us inadvertently drift into a passive approach that when the preconditions are right, the peace is going to come along. And my takeaway of this is that we're much better off when we take action. And then it is kind of like that butterfly on our shoulder when we're undertaking activities that cultivate peace for ourselves and others. It does come along more often. This is a neat fellow, Bruce McEwen, many decade researcher. And his brilliant insight was around what's called agency and locus of control. And what he showed in his studies is when we think that the stressor outside us is in charge, then we have more dis-ease. We have more signs and symptoms that are a problem. And when we realize that our stress response is within us, thus it's within our locus of control, we are healthier. And I just always use the example of the neighbor's dog is barking every night, and we think it's the dog. We're in stress distress mode. We get into arguments with the neighbor. We feel trapped. We feel pinned. If we say, well, actually, yeah, the dog is barking, but it's my response that's getting me, it can feel a little weird. It's not our fault, but it's still in our accountability column. Then there's more that we can do about it. Even a more, one of the most radical aspects of this at all is when we're in fight flight mode, it's our midbrain making decisions. It's very simple. It's black and white. When we're in locus of control mode, prefrontal cortex, executive function, we've got 9 different options. We could talk to the neighbor. We could write a letter. We could take a whole variety of potentially more productive paths forward. Genetic expression is a really cool way to think about whether or not the communication node is in a state of peace or not. And so this is another one of my heroes, Herb Benson from Harvard. I flew to across the country many years ago and was able to spend a week with his team at the Benson Henry Institute on the Harvard campus, learning about how to teach meditation. And his landmark study, which is cited there in the little thought balloon, took 15 lifetime meditators, 15 novices, non-meditators, and then 15 individuals who were trained over 12 weeks to meditate. And he looked at the stress distress genes and the rest and restore genes, hundreds of them, which genes were getting expressed. And over the course of 12 weeks, the folks that were taught to meditate covered half the ground from the non-meditators to the lifetime meditators in 3 months. And so there's a lot of utility quickly available. We don't have to wait forever to benefit from some of these wise practices. I saw him interviewed a number of years later. I don't have the clip. He did a subsequent study years later that showed a single session of meditation changes genetic expression. So even the degree to which in real time we're so dynamic is mind-blowing. In terms of yoga and meditation, again, I always want people to have takeaways. You can, for yoga, you can work with somebody brilliant. We have quite a number of brilliant yogis in the room tonight. So we're very blessed in our community. For people that are sort of pinned down by circumstance or perhaps a bit more introverted, my yoga online from Gaiam's very reputable. For meditation, there are apps. There's a brilliant non-denominational app called Headspace. Many of my patients just feel strongly they want their science-based guided meditation to be Christian. They can use Abide. Insight Timer is free, which is pretty cool. And then Calm is well done. And again, the dose is about 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. So this mental, emotional, spiritual center of the matrix, what's this telling us? And this again can get a little bit metaphysical, but I see this in my practice all the time. We believe the stories that our circumstances tell us, And then these become the stories we tell ourselves. And the wildest thing of all is we believe the stories we keep telling ourselves over time, even if they're no longer grounded in what's happening now in the moment. And this comes from work of Bessel van der Kolk, who developed the term PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder, based on his work with Vietnam vets, and also the adverse childhood event study out of Kaiser many years ago. And so we're going to keep talking about that a little bit because it's so important. But one cool thing anyone can do if you want more peace, check out an online or other set of resources about positive psychology. This then helps build a toolbox around how the stories we tell ourselves changes our physiology. And this can just be deliberacy of language. This can be a couple goes out and it's a picnic and there's some sunshine and there's some ants on the sandwich. Just the deliberacy to focus on the sunshine and not so much on the ants. So this is really simple stuff. So then another sort of metaphysical dimension of this goes back to this book I read in high school. My martial arts instructor asked that we all read this. And one of the quotes in here I've never forgotten says, "You're always free to change your mind, to choose a different future or a different past." And literally for decades, I thought that's wrong. You can't change the past. But now I've realized in lots and lots of work with my patients that we can, because our physiology is a manifestation of the stories we tell ourselves about who and how we are in the world. And I did want to have a little vulnerability on this one. My dad, bless his heart, he was really influenced by the Depression. So as a little kid, he remembers having a victory garden in Spokane, Washington, to support the armed forces around the end of World War II. And he had what I would characterize as a Depression era work ethic, which was about not complaining and getting the job done. And because I was a really sensitive kid, when I'd worked with him at the time, I remember thinking, he doesn't value me, he doesn't value my work. And that had consequences over the rest of my life. And then as I realized, well, wait a minute, maybe one of the most respectful things he could have possibly done for me from his perspective was to impart this sensibility about how one works without complaining and not being aggrandizing about the job. I just was able to get into a state of compassion and sort of forgive him for things he never did wrong in the first place and forgive myself for misunderstanding. And from that perspective, I think we can change the past. And so these dimensions of compassion and forgiveness turn out to have absolutely staggering ramifications for our overall long-term health. And sometimes they're the most powerful layers of all about where we need to really work at our deepest layers of getting better. And then many of you may have seen or heard about David Brooks. And this is a paraphrase, but he says, life breaks us or it breaks us open. So now we get into another dimension of safety. So these things that are adversities, we can feel really pinned and stressed, and then all of those things we want running aren't running. And then when we realize they've made us stronger, or they've deepened our spirituality, or they've made us ultimately more radiant, then the narrative flips. So now our wounds are bleeding light. So there's some just absolutely incredible metaphysical and spiritual dimensions to how our suffering can be transformed. And then at the center of the matrix is our spiritual health, and it's our sense of meaning and our relationship to something greater. And again, in 23 years of medicine and 18 years of functional medicine, I've seen often just this conversation. We can't supplement our way out of a lifestyle deficit, and we can't lifestyle our way out of a mental, emotional, spiritual hole. And so our mental, emotional, spiritual center needs to be grounded in a coherent and sacred relationship with our most deeply held beliefs and our sense of meaning and connection to something greater, whatever that is for us. And sometimes that's a health problem I run into. The person doesn't need a supplement or more or less exercise. They just need to get centered and grounded in who they are mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So super powerful, super important. Lisa's a verb. Any questions before we segue into a guest we have tonight who could talk about another way you can get into peace? I want to make sure you all know we're doing a yoga retreat in Costa Rica if anybody wants to join us, but I want to break this into clean segments. So do people have questions about my presentation?
Is it available somewhere? Like if we want to look at the slides, look at this.
Yeah, we recorded it. You may see me drifting in and out of the camera view because I don't think I'm as rigorous as I should be about where I'm in the frame, but that's kind of the least important part. You'll be able to hear it, you'll be able to see the slides, and then the person who edits content for Seaworthy, Joe Rignol out in New York, he'll probably do a thing where he'll fade the slide in and out from the segment, so you'll see it on the screen and then you'll see the slide itself. So we'll put that up on should be able to get that in a number of settings if we're successful, Honey. Okay, yeah. Yes?
Would the same concept work with fear? Like if you primed fear, you would get similar responses? Like the opposite of peace?
Yeah, well, fear is hardwired into the fight, flight, freeze, faint part. And so the degree to which fear triggers and drives that is another one of these things that, it's got a legitimate genesis, right? It's part of keeping us alive. But a lot of what seems to happen for a lot of folks when I look at these different things, hear their stories, look at their labs, is that basically the security guard has gotten promoted to the CEO. And that's not really fair to anyone, and it doesn't end well. And it's not even good for the security guard, right? Because they don't have the chops for it. So we need this chill executive running the show, and we need our fear, the security guard protecting us when there's an actual threat. Yeah.
I'm curious, like the digestion piece, is there a difference between like a slower digestion and a faster digestion and like how much you absorb and like what affects that?
Yeah, a lot of people with gut medical problems, like irritable bowel syndrome, most functional medicine doctors are kind of frustrated by that diagnosis because it can have rapid transit loose stools and or constipation, but almost invariably it's one of these sort of parasympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, faint dominant pictures. And so then that can affect bowel transit times one way or the other. And in some ways, constipation's almost always got kind of a shutdown digestive tone mode. I think a lot of what happens in the United States is we do have kind of a mechanistic view of things. So we think our guts are plumbing and our nerves are wires, and we don't realize we're more complex than that. We don't realize if we're in fight, flight, freeze, faint mode, we're just shutting down a whole bunch of physiology, including bowel transit. All right, well, let's make sure and get some time. And so Elise Spofford, who is a yoga instructor and a friend of mine, a colleague, and has a bunch of other amazing things that she does. She and I are going to be down in Costa Rica next February, and we have slots if anybody would like to join us. And she's going to come up for a minute and talk about that if anyone's interested.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for being here. It's wonderful to be gathered in a group of curious minds and hearts. And thank you, Dr. Downey, for a brilliant presentation. I always marvel at this man's mind and how he can so eloquently put so many things forward from his personal practice and from all that you've gathered over the years. My name is Elise. I live in Ninilchik. I love coming to Homer. It always feels like a beautiful retreat in and of itself to be here. So I teach yoga. I'm a massage therapist and I'm a functional medicine health coach. And so excited to be partnering with Dr. Downey in February the 16th to the 23rd. We'll be in Costa Rica on the Caribbean coast at a place called Tierra de Sueños, which translates to Land of Dreams. And I think as we digest everything that we've been given tonight, including tools of the functional medicine matrix and the timeline, what really stands out to me is how integrated everything, all systems are in our body. And when we can become aware of the stress mode. And I'm in a little bit of a stress mode right now. I'm not used to being in front of people with eyes open. So I just like, before I came up, I took a deep breath and I thought, all of these people are my friends. I have met some of them, not all of them. But to realize that we have agency, we can put ourselves into these places, maybe a little outside of our comfort zone. Sometimes it's circumstantial. Sometimes we just find ourselves, there internally. But that we have the power of our breath. We have the power of mindfulness practices, our choices, and just kind of, choices like where we spend our time, what places and people bring forth a greater sense of peace. And so we're really excited to be going to a peaceful place. Costa Rica is known to be a country of peace. They have not had a national army for decades. They're known within the region to be a peaceful place. It's a blue zone as well. So you see a lot of interconnected relationships. And so we chose Costa Rica for a number of reasons. And we're really excited to be there. Just want to paint a little bit of a picture of where we'll be from San Jose, which is where you'd likely fly in. We'll be taking a shuttle to the Caribbean coast and kind of situated right on the edge of rainforest and water. And we're looking forward to daily talks with Dr. Rob. Much of what you heard today will expand, will grow a little bit deeper. We'll have daily yoga practices as well. And then we want to create a vibe that, we have some people who are coming that are more introverted, like want to spend some time swinging in the hammock, reading a book. And I've had other attendees say, like, I want to go snorkeling and scuba diving and take surf lessons and hike to that hidden waterfall and do all of the things. And so we're trying to create enough opportunity, enough flexibility. Everything is all inclusive. So 3 meals a day. We'll be staying in bungalows. We've got a few attendees here tonight. So I'm telling you a lot of what you already know. And then we're sprinkling in some fun things like a cacao ceremony and a beach bonfire dance night. And the Caribbean region is known for its African influence. So we'll have a calypso band joining us for dinner one night. And when I think about peace in my life, it's generally practices with people enjoying having fun. So we're really excited to extend this invitation to you. There's a QR code. If it's something you're interested in, you'll access our website there. And I'm here tonight as well to answer any questions. I brought business cards as well because I've been in conversation. If you just personally want to communicate, I'll be here for Anna's practice too. So I'll be here for the remainder of the night. In closing, I want to offer a poem. I was working on memorizing this poem, but I did not do my homework enough to memorize it. And I felt that it would be unjust to the poet Wendell Berry to mess up on his words. But poetry is a source of peace for me. I spend a lot of time reading poetry and just some of the lines that come back to me in those places I find really helpful. Wendell Berry is a farmer in the Midwest and finds peace being out on his land and just observing the wildlife. So he references the great heron and a wood drake here, but I invite you with me just to take a mindful moment before we segue into our yoga practice next, and just to take a moment to get comfortable in your chair. If you're not already, you can reposition feet, you can take hands to your lap. If it is of comfort to you to soften the eyelids closed, you're welcome to, but if you prefer to keep the eyes open, I think something underscored today is like the feeling of safety. So for some of us, our vision is that for us. But let's just take a moment and we'll welcome a deep breath in through the nose. And an even longer out breath. Twice more breathing in, letting the belly expand, the rib cage flare, and a long breath out. And last breath in together. Releasing breath out. And just opening our ears to listen, to notice what images come to mind, what feelings well up within us as we listen to Wendell Berry's poem, The Peace of Wild Things. when despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be. I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water. And I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. And I invite you to hover here just into this great pause, to continue to breathe big into the moment. And while their eyes are open or closed, just to take a moment to conjure yourself in a peaceful place, perhaps something realistic you have experienced before. And to notice what sensations are with you, what sounds, what sights. Welcome, one more communal breath in and out. Eyes open if they're not already. Thank you for joining with me in that practice. One thing I'm leaving with today, one characteristic I try to lead with in life is curiosity. We come here with our own story, and I think if we can take some of what Dr. Rob has shared with us, even if it's a little tidbit, and just to get curious and to follow the threads and the trajectory, I think we'll be well served as we go back out into life. So thank you so much for being here. And again, we hope if you can that you'll join us in Costa Rica.